I had always wanted to move out of my parents' house. I'm one of 8, and not having to come home to my siblings wailing, mom and dad screaming, and the strain of sharing 2 bathrooms between 10 people was an everlasting yet unrealistic dream. One day, after working my routine 11-hour shift at work, I clambered up the crusted carpet floors and collapsed onto my rigid mattress. It was a ritual at this point. I had come to terms that the only accommodation I could afford would be a house share. I typed cheapest places to rent near me into a browser app, and as usual, I was disappointed to see that the potential options were neither near me nor were they cheap. This time, it was different though. As I sorted by lowest price first, I saw a listing uploaded 12 seconds ago. An image of an alluring modern home flashed before me, and I barely caught a glimpse of the price before the post vanished. The mental image I snapped convinced me that the price was $120 a month. Considering the lowest price I had seen before was $700, I put it down to either a technical glitch or a mental glitch caused by my sleep-deprived mind. I just couldn't get the image of that house out of my mind, though. It was a romantical obsession. The house was plastered in my vision every time I closed my eyes. I would spend every waking second thinking about it and every tireless night dreaming about it. I didn't know whether what I had seen was real or whether this desperation was driving me to insanity. There was so much more about the house I wanted to discover. Where was it located? Was it really $120 a month? How many people share it? These were all questions that would remain unanswered until I would see that house again. My father had been fighting an ongoing battle with cancer for 4 years. Between the countless chemotherapy treatments, we were starting to realize he was fighting a losing battle. Before his diagnosis, he worked as a car salesman. We wouldn't see him much, as he was committed to putting food on the table for his wife and 8 children. That responsibility had now been passed on to my 2 brothers. I helped out where I could, but I knew moving out would be a huge financial burden lifted from their shoulders. It would also let me escape the stirring pot of depression ingrained in the house. I was beginning to lose hope, though. Perhaps I was destined to inherit the pain and suffering from my parents and continue living a life of stress. I was thinking about whether I really was losing my mind over a house or if it was more the prospect of starting a new life. Weeks of my laborious life continued, and my daily scrolling never amounted to anything more than disappointment. Then one night, it happened. I saw it. The same exact image. The same image that had burrowed its way into my brain since I first saw it. It was real. I forced myself out of the shackles of excitement to screenshot the image. I couldn't lose it again. I tapped into the post and scrolled down, taking screenshots like a deranged ex-girlfriend collecting ammunition for an argument. When the post vanished, there was a conflicting feeling of knowing the opportunity may be gone forever, but that I had everything I needed to answer my questions. Then the post came back. I quickly went back into paparazzi mode, and then the post vanished again like it was never there. I rummaged through my camera roll and began the inspection process. The property was truly astonishing. I spent a few minutes admiring the architectural efforts that were put into the construction of it. It wasn't an exotic mansion by any means, but it looked homely, and I could see myself living there for the rest of my life if I had to. The next image I captured showed the monthly rent. This would determine whether my future would be filled with hope or dismay. I was so nervous that I covered the number with my hand and slowly peeled my wrist back to reveal my destiny. Sure enough, there it was. Clear as day, $120 a month. I clutched the phone to my chest and felt the device pounding in my hands to the crescendoing rhythm of my heart. I scrolled to the next image and saw the address. 12 Foley Street. That was a 40-minute bike ride from where I lived. It wasn't the closest property I had seen advertised, but I was less than an hour's cycle away from a brand new life. I was more than satisfied. The next image showed the description of the property. It was deserted except for a phone number and email address. It was strange that a house with such a low monthly rent would have no additional information at all, but I was relieved to know that even though the post was no longer there, I had some sort of communication with the landlord. I kept scrolling and saw a screenshot where the post wasn't advertised. That must have been where it vanished temporarily. I scrolled onto the next image, and there it was again, in all its glory. Truly breathtaking. But this time, something was different. The price had changed. It now read $118 a month. Confusion washed over me. That's weird. I kept scrolling and everything else was identical to the previous listing except for the price. I called the number, but it was no longer in service. I sent a barrage of email inquiries and never got a response back. Determined to uncover the full truth, I decided to track down anyone who had lived there before. After hours of scouring social media and stumbling across a blog, I found a name: Laura Evans. She was listed as a former tenant who had mysteriously moved out less than a day after moving in. I reached out to her hoping for a response, and to my surprise, she replied almost immediately. "You're looking at that house on Foley Street, aren't you?" Her message began. My fingers trembled as I typed back a confirmation. Laura agreed to meet at a nearby cafe, and her urgency was palpable. When we met, her eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and relief. She wasted no time in recounting her experience. The house is cursed," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I moved in because the rent was so cheap, like you. Everything seemed perfect at first, but then I started noticing strange things. Footsteps at night, voices from the vents. You know, the usual horror movie shtick." Laura explained that she had done some digging. She found out about the house's dark history and its role as a sacrificial ground. The rent, always absurdly low, dropped by £1 for each soul taken within its walls. She said the craziest part was when she stumbled upon an old diary hidden in the attic, belonging to a previous tenant who documented similar occurrences before mysteriously vanishing. I was lucky to escape," she said, her voice shaking. As soon as I stepped in, I felt this overwhelming urge to leave. I took my things and ran, never looked back. When I saw the rent drop by another £1 a week later, I knew I had to help people, so I started the blog. She finished off her coffee and let out a huge sigh as she reclined back into her seat. We parted ways, and I headed home and crashed down onto my mattress, which felt a little bit softer than it always had. My siblings' cries rang through my ears like a familiar lullaby. I pulled up my phone and had a message from Laura. "Thanks for coming and hearing my story. I really enjoyed today." I went to my Photos app and started scrolling through the same images that I had spent so long obsessing over. I admired the picture of the house one last time and reluctantly sent it to the digital landfill. Then my phone started ringing and it seemed to be vibrating with a strange urgency. I recognized the number immediately as it was the same one from the image of the property description on my screen. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this narration. I just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my patrons who are subscribed over at my Patreon. We have a great big thank you from me to you, Alonzo, Kozak, Icy Narrates, Jesse Hartley, Andreas Anderson Linden, and Geek Sanctuary. Thank you guys so much for supporting me. If you would like to support too, just check out the links in my description. And thank you again for listening. I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.